No, I got it. So he should be good now. Okay. All right.
Got it. Right there.
Yeah, put it over.
Huh? I never know who's looking.
You know, it's so weird. I was talking to my daughter about something that's got going on. I didn't put it on my phone. I didn't do anything, and that stuff's showing up on my phone.
I'm telling
I
you.
didn't put nothing in there. Didn't even search
I was,
for
I,
it.
I brought up a question with Adriana, was talking and did no searches or anything. Thank you, buddy. And it was real. I said, look at this. Is this strange or what?
It's creepy.
It's big government, baby.
Oh my God.
Oh, we're
This is
recording big
crazy.
government. Yeah, it's all about the government. It's all good. Yeah, right.
So you're good here?
I guess. I could pause it though, right?
Right, if someone comes in, do you have to let them in? I don't really know how that.
I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't even know. Oh, I didn't start the video. Are we starting a video?
Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna go grab my notes first.
all right.
Yeah.
And we think of pause recording. This is ridiculous.
Gathering the information. Yeah, I do. I'm actually, that's actually on my list. I'll be done with it earlier this morning from the airport. It's all good. Thank you.
I admitted.
Oh, okay. Oh, hey, Caddy. Caddy, can you hear me?
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Caddy, how are you?
I'm doing good.
You can't see me, can you? Now you can?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you?
Can you hear me?
You gotta start video, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to start the video 1 second.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Now you
Sorry, I
can hear me
couldn't be
and you can
there.
see me. How are you?
I'm doing good. We just finished Bolt, so I couldn't drive there.
You're
My
all bolt
apologies.
ready to
I'm
go?
Bolt.
Good stuff.
All right.
Good
Yes.
stuff.
Harry, we have reverse. Come in on your own now.
Natalia, you there? Try and get everybody in here, Caddy.
Sure.
All right. And hey, Natalia, how are you? Oh. See if we can unmute.
You're unmuted. Well, that's good news.
Is that better? Can you hear me now? Natalia? She can hear me. How about now? Okay, I can't hear you. I think it's on your end. All right, cool. Yep, I am.
Will this ever close for you?
Yeah, you know what that, since I can roll it.
Hi, how are you? Look, that's for this one.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks, Jimmy. Gabby, how are you? It's a pleasure to meet you. You can take it off. I don't know, vaccinated, yeah, that's, we're all vaxxed here. The majority of us. So, but thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. And welcome to Keller Williams. You're just starting, right? Fantastic. Right. That's one of the things. Patty, how long have you been in business now?
4 years.
4 years. So I'll have anywhere, if we have a brand new agent, Gabby,
Sylvia.
stepping in, and I can have anybody from brand new to somebody with 10 or more years of the business experience, but we still try to make it interesting enough for everybody to pick something up from today's class moving forward. I mean, for you, it's going to be a lot of that. Now, who's doing your pro? Are you teaching? Are you pro coaching with or mentoring with Robert? You're with Heather. Heather's okay. Good, fantastic. She'll do a nice job. All right. We'll just. What do I do now?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I know. I know what happens when you have buttons in front of you. You start clicking things. Let me see if I can get us back. I'm not sure what I did here. Okay. Started to panic for a second. Can you hear me, Kathy?
I can hear you.
Thank you. I think we lost Natalia. And it looks like we're all coming back in there now. I moved my mouse around a little bit too much. Kathy, any questions for you? How'd you do with the transaction? I know we spoke yesterday at the meeting.
I'm doing good. I did, yeah, no issues with any transaction. I had to cancel one contract because after we signed the contract, we realized that I started looking into the property, and there was the property was in a flood area, and it wasn't close. It was just me being curious and looking into public records. I find out that it was in a flood.
Yeah. So. And one thing I was going to tell you after the meeting yesterday, and of course everyone got disconnected because we're all varying off in different directions. One thing you might want to do, especially when you're working in flood areas, not only ask the question, because sometimes you'll call up the seller's agent and say, hey, is the seller paying flood insurance? So if they just take that question to the seller and the seller says no, they may not, it may not be paying it because they may not have a mortgage. So they've never had to reapply through FEMA to pay that additional flood insurance. Do you follow?
Yeah, but I asked, and they were, yeah, they were paying flood insurance.
Okay, so they were already. So see, if they had a mortgage, even if it was satisfied, and they would still continue to carry the policy because they want to make sure their house is protected. But it's, one thing that, for a lot of us working down the shore now is not everybody has flood insurance. They're willing to take that risk. The only time you can inheritably take that risk is when you don't have a mortgage.
And this wasn't an obvious area where it was an obvious flood area. I usually do my search before I put the offer in.
Right.
I always check, but just because I had a flood area in Collinswood and in Haddonfield.
Yeah, right. So, it's right. It's actually Cherry Hill, believe it or not, because the border changes right there. Yeah.
Wow.
Depending on if you're coming off on Kings Highway on that entrance, it's still Cherry Hill right up until about that bridge.
Right. Mhm.
So anyway, but that's good. You have to ask those deeper questions because the agent may not dive too deep into it, give you the answer. No, you don't need any. The seller doesn't need it. It doesn't pay it. Well, it could be true, but they don't have a mortgage. So, or they're willing to take the risk.
Yeah,
So,
and
good deal.
for them may not be in their best interest to disclose that until the end, we are in the middle of
Hey, and quite frankly, depending on where the house is, like if it's down the shore, I mean, lots are worth 800 to $1.5 million. So the house might be worth 300. You'll never get any money back anyway, because they're just going to give you lot costs. So
right.
anyway, so moving past that, I'm glad you resolved that. Anthony, how you been? All right? I don't know.
Hey,
If
Mike,
Anthony,
yeah, I'm doing well, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. It's good seeing you. Good seeing you.
You too.
Um,
I'm
are
actually
you-
under contract right now with a property of my own.
Oh, good, good.
Excellent, Anthony.
That's fantastic
you.
news. Any questions you have regarding that, Anthony?
Well, right now it's an REO property, so we're trying to do our best to work with the bank and everything. We might have to extend the date out a little bit longer because we were scheduled to close on the 20th. So we may
Okay.
need a little bit of additional time, on that. So,
Now
so they're working with us. Mhm.
You caught my attention. Are you buying that? You have an interest in the purchase?
No, not me personally. It's
Okay,
someone
good.
else, the client of mine.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Because one thing you want to learn today, especially if you're doing REO properties, it's going to be interesting down the road, is you
Okay.
can't have a financial interest in the property if you're a realtor and expect to get paid.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's something you want to keep in the back of your mind when you're drawing a
Mm.
contract or writing an offer. You might want to, get a colleague, get Jim, get somebody to have that commission go into their name, and then we kind of do it internally afterwards. But you can't have a financial
Oh.
interest in an REO property. So it's just something good to know, because we're going to start seeing, especially now with the foreclosures going to come back into play eventually. REOs are going to come
Okay.
back into play. There's a slew of people that just, got a lot of PPP money, got a lot of, unemployment money,
Yeah.
and they just didn't satisfy mortgages and or anything else. So
Okay.
it's going to be something, but just keep that in mind when you caught my ear when you said and I heard that, and I said, okay, I hope that you
Yeah.
didn't have that in your name and you were purchasing it, because then you might not get, you may not see a commission coming your way, but you would at least have a sale.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyway, as I usually start, we have a brand new agent here in the class live, which is, we didn't know how that was going to work out, because we either do it here or we do it at Marlton. So it was kind of like I did Marlton last month, Medford this month, and we'll probably go back into Marlton next month. We'll just rotate. So we didn't know how many agents we're going to have. It's kind of late. It is September and everybody going back to school. But I usually start out with a segue. Is there any questions that we have so far from anybody? I mean, we don't have a whole lot of people, but is there anybody that has any questions that they're currently working with now that they need some assistance with that I'll be able to answer? That's a no. Gabrielle has all kinds of questions. Like, where do you start? You probably never written an offer. Were you in business before in the real estate? So brand new agent, which is really nice. And we have to just make sure we do the right thing. So one thing I wanted to spend some time with, and I think we started to in Marlton, is really under paragraph 43. Does everybody understand truly? In other words, once you get a property under contract, whether it's a sale and or a listing, are we putting the right information in the contract? Are we getting the seller's disclosures, which we should be doing? As we learned yesterday, which was really nice, is working with our colleagues from the preferred warranty, get those warranties in the contracts, have the sellers sign off that you've either presented it and or they're buying the warranty. I mean, that warranty is invaluable, especially now. We're becoming, this market becomes very litigious because everybody feels a lot. I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people feel after they purchased, they got, got advantage of. They got sucked into the market. They had an impulse, they bought, and there weren't any inspections. But it doesn't stop you from giving a warranty, right? I mean, if you don't do any inspections, at least you could have a home warranty and protect your client. So those are things you really need to get yourself secured with, so you can become a better salesperson. In other words, have a better referral network, because if you do sell a property to someone, it does have some issues, and they can lean back on a home warranty program. They're going to always think about you and say, you know what, at least my realtor had my back, where they're going to try and help me. Katie, did you have a question? Katie? I think she might be on a call, but anyway, as far as what we really need, since we do have a brand new agent, I'll reflect back on that. I mean, this is the brand new contract. We'll get you a copy of it so you can at least have some boilerplate to look at. And then once you start doing your training with Heather, she will go into this as well with you. So we'll give you a copy of that before you leave. Paragraph 43, I mean, some of the things that I feel that are our biggest misses in the office is making sure, I mean, one thing on the listing side, because you almost have to put that division line up. Am I the listing agent? Am I the buyer's agent? If you're a listing agent, there's a few other things that you need that are contractual that can and are required by the state real estate commission to make sure that you're in compliance for your licensing. So if you're working, let's just break down the seller first. You know, you go out to the house, you do your walkthrough, you do your preliminary CMA. Is a CMA required prior to listing the property?
I always do it. I always give it to them when I meet them, or I send them through an email, or I attach it to the initial documents that I send them, like the listing agreement and the CIS and all that.
And that's good that you're doing that, because it is required. It's not mandated through the state real estate commission that you have to list a property and do a CMA, but how do you create value if you don't? You know, so you don't have a starting line. And if the property is ever contested, for instance, say if the property is contested, goes to court, a buyer feels that you know you overpriced the house. In other words, you had a $500,000 house in a $300,000 neighborhood. The first question the attorneys are going to ask you upon depositions are, "Hey, did you do a CMA? Did you do a real estate market analysis?" And you're going to sit there and say yes or no. And they're not going to ask. You're not going to ask for a bunch of fluff. It's not going to be like watching Congress or the Senate. It's going to be yes or no. You either did it or you didn't. And if you did it, guess what you're going to have? An email. You're going to have the seller's going to have reception of that, and they're going to ask for that, and they're able to. And in the world we're in right now with technology, keep in mind, anything you text, anything you leave a voice message, anything you email is all going to be used either with you or against you. So you need to have, you really should have that in your file. You should have that in, you know, whatever systems you're using. If you use a command, it should be in there. You're still using .loop, it should be in there somewhere, that file. Even if you have a hard copy, if you're completely old school, you got to have a hard copy of it. Just because it will be asked for at one point in time, especially if, when I started to, the segue is if it's contested. So buyer comes in, you have the house listed at 500,000. They go in, they make a deal, and your seller is, communicating with them. And one thing leads to another. You get to a contract, and now the buyer takes himself out of the market. They go into contract. They do home inspections. They do well and septic if it's necessary, and they've spent a couple $1,000. And then if they have a mortgage, the bank, of course, is going to do an appraisal. So if that appraiser goes out and finds that the house is worth significantly less, they're going to ask you eventually, how'd you come up with this number? You know, maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's a super custom home in a remote area. And then somebody's going to have to do, not to get too technical with everybody, but a cost approach. A lot of lenders don't like to do a cost approach because they rather do a market analysis and just get a general idea and use a circumference. But there's a lot of things that you have to get involved with knowing your numbers. And that's one of them. I mean, that's one thing that the founder always talks about is knowing your, the founder of Keller Williams is knowing your numbers. And this is something you should have a really good idea. When you're marketing a property, sometimes the seller is going to always push you to a higher number, but where can that number be? Is it in, even in the same hemisphere as the market? So you have to really be concerned about that. Because quite frankly, it could be a problem, down the road. And I should not click things, so they just did it again. Bear with me for a second if you can still hear me, but I was trying to get a different view on my Zoom. There we go. And I lost myself. Anyway, so that's important to know. So if we're on the listing side, we're a couple things that are really important, and on the back end, they're not actually in the contract of 118, is on, is dual disclosure. If we're going to possibly be working with a seller and a buyer, our own buyer, we should have that dual disclosure side. I watch more people fined monthly on not having that form executed. And that form is important. It actually becomes part of an audit if you did or did not tell your seller in advance that you have the ability to list and sell the house instead of being actually precluded from doing that. Question? Any questions so far?
No.
All right. So dual disclosure, we need to have that, correct? We need to have what we call the listing contract. So that listing contract should be executed by all parties of the property. Say hypothetically, one of the parties bought the house years ago. They met dream, person of their life, and that person now is living in that property, and they are married now. Okay, so now all of a sudden, 3 or 4 years down the road, things just aren't going well, and that person, the original seller, calls you up and says, "Hey, I want to sell my house." And you go over, you do your CMA, you do your walkthrough, your CMA, you do your listing contract, and you say, "Oh, did you ever, I thought you got, you got married," and they'll either say, "Yeah, I did, but it didn't work out," and now all of a sudden you're stuck in a position. Do you need that extra person to sign the listing agreement, and more importantly, the agreement of sale once you successfully sell the property? And since New Jersey is a communal state, you would, under most circumstances. There are some exceptions to that, and one would be, obviously, if that significant other signed off on any interest in the property. Because what's going to happen is, if there's a marriage and then there's a divorce and there's a divorce decree, that interest is usually addressed in that divorce decree, but not necessarily in the title. And it could be more complicated if they're just added on as a quitclaim deed, and now all of a sudden that's recorded that there's a quitclaim deed with both names on it, because sometimes somebody may want to make sure that their significant other has an interest in the property. Why? In case something happens to them, then it bequeaths to them. So there's a number of things. There's a lot of moving parts, is what I'm trying to say. So, if you're getting involved with a simple, I just got remarried, my wife or my husband is now part of the deal, or they're not part of the deal, you got to have them sign a listing contract. You really should have them. If they're not, if you really feel it's going to be contested, know that's going to be a potential problem in the future, because the title company, once they pull it up, if there was a quitclaim deed filed and they pull up that both names are on the deed, they're going to want you to they're going to really want you to chase down that significant other and sign off on their interest. So depending on your relationship, that could be a really good thing or a really bad thing, because it might want to just hold it over your head that I'm not going to sign, and I don't really care what you do. So those are things that come up every day. I had one recently. It's a mom bought a house for wanted to get their son back on his feet. He was married, and they all came in, they bought the house together, and we're going to be listing the house. And quite frankly, I'm going to need all their signatures. And it was the worst news. It was like, like that firecracker goes off in the room and no one knows about it. I said, I'm going to need everyone to sign off on the listing. And more so, even if you get beyond the signing off on the listing, I'm definitely going to have to have her sign off on her interest in the property, because because the way this was arranged is they would have had the wife having an equitable interest in the deed.
Mhm.
Okay. Wasn't on the mortgage. because the mom paid the mortgage, the mom used her qualifications, but she put them on the deed. And it's, you know, sometimes we do things with our hearts instead of making sure we get some attorney, making sure that your interest is explained to you. And I, you know, I remember we had this conversation, you know, prior, and here it's coming to fruition that it's not a good deal. Sometimes it's not good to cohabitate together with kids even when they grow up. Anyway, any questions with that? I mean, these are all circumstances that come in our everyday conversations with, you know, 250 or thereabout agents. And I share those sometimes because they're not one-offs. They happen a lot. You know, interest in a property, you know, are you responsible for knowing as a listing agent? Yeah, you probably didn't ask the right questions. You know, who's living in the house? You know, if you see clothes on both sides of the closet, that's an indicator. You know, one of the insurance companies will ask you, you know, one thing for certain, if somebody sues us afterwards, I think we're good. If somebody sues us afterwards, they're going to ask you if you actually walk the property. You're going to have to say yes or no. So if you had a property, you took the listing, never really went there because you sold them a house 2 or 3 years ago. They finished off the basement, or the basement now has a foot of water. Do you think the insurance company or the attorneys are going to ask you that question? Of course they are. They're going to say, hey, did you inspect the property? Now, if you knew that there was a problem with the basement and there was water and you walked down there, that's a disclosable, you know, issue. So is that seller disclosing that on the seller's inspection? The state definitely wants to make sure that we don't help a seller, okay, with the completion of the seller's disclosure statement, but they want us to read it. They actually want you to if you hand it out, get it back, you should read it. I mean, you should know. Yes, Katie.
So to that, I have a question because I heard a couple different positions on this from brokers. Do we have to sign that seller's disclosure?
I prefer that you do. It's
Okay.
just it's really, if you look at the word before your signature, it says acknowledgement. That's all it is. It doesn't say that you've done anything other than acknowledged it. I have one now. You know, the realtor said I never sign them. I said, is the realtor part of the contract? No.
No.
Really
That's
care.
why.
It's a mute point. And whether there are some brokers that just feel that whatever you put your signature on, you reviewed it. So guess what they're going to do? They're still going to ask you if you gave the seller's disclosure, or if you gave just the buyer's seller's disclosure, and they will eventually ask you, did you review it? And how dumb do we look if we say no? So not many realtors are going to be that dumb to say no. They're going to say, of course I read it. And they say, why didn't you acknowledge it? If you saw that the seller says they get water in the basement every time it rains, why didn't you disclose that? You're the licensed professional. So guess who's getting sued now for incompetence? So whether you sign it or not, you're still transmitting it to somebody. You're either sending them mail, you're handing it to them, you're emailing it to them. You are involved. You could say it's your assistant that did that. You could say it's your colleague that did that. You could say it's the office that did that. But who's the agent? They're coming after you. So new point. And I've seen agents argue over this. You know, I'm not going to, it doesn't matter. Okay.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
No,
I just wanted to ask you because that's a couple of brokers have said the same thing. So
yeah,
the other question I have is,
yes.
I always sign the first page of the contract, not the contract, but the notice, the first page of the contract.
Right.
But I had a couple of guys.
You know what that first page is, don't you?
Yeah, it's
that's your CSI.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so and you should be signing that now.
Okay.
And I can't imagine any agent not disclosing their type of brokerage, right? You don't have any pushback on that, do you?
No, my question was because I had a deal with Sam. the
Lepore?
guy, and he doesn't sign it. So
No.
I asked him why you would not sign. He's like, I'm not part of the contract. I don't
He
sign
isn't.
any.
That's the right answer. But guess what? When the real estate commission comes in the front door, guess what they ask for? Copy the
CIS.
CI. They want to copy the offer. They want to copy the customer information statement, and they want to copy the contract, and deposit, and the deposit the day it was recorded, deposited. If it's more than 3 days, then of course it's a problem. Yeah, that's okay. So he is right.
The reason why I start questioning is Sam is pretty big in the industry. So if he's not signing, why am I signing it?
Okay, well, if I drive my truck down to Turnpike at 85 miles an hour, should you follow me and blame me for the ticket or take responsibility?
No, yeah, you're right.
Okay, there we
You're
go.
right.
So
You're
there's
right.
there's actually a reason that a bunch of attorneys in the state of New Jersey got together, they finally, I'm going to tell you, after 38 years, I could tell you this happened, what, about 6 years ago now, 7 years ago, whatever it is, that they have a unified contract that everyone agreed to, bringing North, Central, and South Jersey together, which is still, as you can imagine, there's, we had so many different variations of contracts going around the state. Now we have one contract we kind of use as a boilerplate. We still have people fighting it. Okay, next. Just if you don't want to, the point is there's a reason why they put the signature lines there. They want you to acknowledge your agency.
Okay.
If you don't want to be part of the contract, then would you equally not want to be part of the commission?
No.
No, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
I'm telling you, it was just very interesting that they argue not to sign that page. And I've been doing it for 4 years. So I'm like, what?
No, Kenny, I've been doing it for 38. I can tell you there's always somebody who wants to argue over something stupid, and that's okay.
Okay, sounds
Just
good.
move, you know what it is, you move on, you let it go. And I usually say, well, geez, if you don't really care that much, maybe we should take you out of the commission portion. See if you get his interest then. If it's your listings, you could demand he signs it, right?
Yeah, no, I
you
don't
go.
remember if I probably was the buyer agent.
Yeah, if you were the seller's agent, you could have been a little bit more, put your foot down. Do you want to get paid? Sign it. Anyway, or you just go get his broker to sign it. Oh, I know. Okay, so you're good with that. So that agency agreement, and these are the questions that come up. That these are real questions that come up during these discussions when we're putting these contracts together. So a couple things that are, making sure that we're in compliance with our contracts is we have RESPA agreements. Does everybody understand what a RESPA agreement is? We have a brand new agent that knows. What is a RESPA agreement? Just curious what you would think. Disclosure of agency affiliations. In other words, it's going to be companies that we do business with. We have to make sure that we disclose that to the general public. And I put her on the spot. I don't want to do that, but it's important for us to know that we want to have that RESPA, because what's going to happen if we go in and say we have a seller, say we're doing a seller side, and we go in and say, hey, listen, we'll do your processing and we'll take care of everything. Well, the take care of things happens to do with the fact that we're referring another one of our entities to our clients, right? So we want them to sign that, because what's on that fee schedule, right? And most likely, I'm going to bet probably 9 out of 10 of us won't say, oh, and by the way, there's a nominal fee involved with the processing of your loan, even after we sell the property. So unless you have some kind of concierge services going on that of course, absorbing those fees, then that's something you will have to make sure you disclose with your seller. If it's a buyer, obviously, regardless if you're using YHT, one of our affiliates, and or anybody else, you should still be disclosing the fact that there's going to be fees involved. We actually have in our addendums, in our PDFs, that I think last I counted, there was well over 30 of them. So there's a lot. I mean, there's well over 30 addendums that we use on a day-to-day basis that get involved with our business. So you really should have a generalized understanding as far as what's needed. You know, especially, you know, we talk about dual disclosure, we talk about CAS, right? Customer information statements. We talk about the dual disclosure. You know, if the house is from built before 1978, we're disclosing the fact that it could be there could be possible lead paint. Dealing with a house right now is built in 1870, and buyer wanted to know if they should do if it has lead-based paint. I said it absolutely had a lead-based paint. I said you were able to get lead-based paint in Philadelphia up into the 70s, early 80s. So if you dig down deep enough, you're going to get, you know, in the woodwork, you're going to get some lead-based paint sooner or later. So, but depending on the ages, you need to know that. Home warranty, that needs to be disclosed. That needs to be signed off. Seller's disclosures, again, need to be signed off by all parties. Hopefully both realtors, sometimes one or none. So it's all good. Hold harmless. Why do we want to hold harmless? What would be the reason for a hold harmless, you think? Any questions with that? Because that comes into play, especially now. If we do any estates, say we do an estate and the seller's son or daughter or siblings are now managing the estate as an executor or the executress. What do they need to cover? So they might want to come down and say, listen, I'm selling the property as is, where is. So you do a hold harmless, just because then they can't come back to the estate or any one of the folks signing off and making them personally liable for any anything that they find after the, you know, post sale, which would be important. The other thing is, you know, I see a lot of associations. I think a lot of us, I mean, I've seen a lot of realtors, and I think some of the frustrations with some of the realtor calls that I get during the week and, you know, every day is the fact that they don't understand what an HOA is. So when you have a homeowners association, you have to understand they make the rules and they set them and they warrant them. And some associations are more proactive than others, where there's actually punitive damage, there's fines, there's notices. Those are things you have to pay attention to. If you have a client and you're going through your needs analysis list and they have a cat or they have a dog or they have a pet, whatever, you need to find out if there's any restrictions. Even if it's a snake, there could be a provision where they don't want any type of animals at all. So you really want to make sure that you're not wasting your time, and more so your client's time, more so with the dogs, because right now, you know, the state is, you know, there's service dogs, which of course, and you know, this gets more important. You know, you would think it's only rentals, right? It's not. It's single family. It could be, it could actually be a 55, or it could actually be a townhouse community or singles. So it's or more so condos. But make sure there aren't height, you know, weight limits. Sometimes they'll put on there, but also breed restrictions is what I want to say. I want to say deed, but breed restrictions, because there's about top five dogs that aren't covered under any insurance. I mean, I have one of them, and I think if I get kicked out of my house, I'd have to find a house for the dog before me. But you have to really watch specific breeds on certain neighborhoods that have pet restrictions built into their covenants. So it's really important to pay attention to that, because they might, a lot of people will think like, oh, I could bring a dog anywhere because say it's a service dog. There's still some, you know, breed restrictions because there are liabilities with the insurance companies. They might be able to get a rider to cover their dog, but that leads to a further involved, you know, due diligence process with the buyer. That is one that you really want to say, if you have a buyer or a renter, say, listen, why don't you go meet with this insurance, the HOA, and that way I'm not going to sell you a house and then find out that they're going to kick these people out of here because of the pet, because people will leave with their pets. They're not going to just get rid of the pet. It's kind of, you got to really watch that, because you can definitely set yourself up for a lawsuit there. More so is not only there's companion, or I should say exemption sometimes. Sometimes if it's a companion, if somebody is having some emotional stress and they have a psychiatrist or somebody write them out a script that they can have a companion dog, that doesn't mean that you can bring that companion dog to anybody that has an HOA. You still, again, same thing with a service dog is good. Make sure it's protected, because people kind of like see some of these exemptions and think that they automatically fall into those. They have responsibilities to do their due diligence. You just don't want to make sure that you take on that whole due diligence yourself, because you could find yourself faulting a little bit there. It's kind of hard. At $300 an hour on average with the attorneys, it adds up pretty quick when you have some potential lawsuits going on. So the other is making sure that we have our escrows diagnosed, or I should say outlaid where we're going there with those. I mean, in the contract, it's very clear. And this is like, we talked a little bit about it the other day during our office meeting, is making sure you're telling people on page 2, it's, what do we have here? Paragraph 3, where the payments, it gives you multiple choices where you're having this money. I mean, my suggestion is having the title company hold, especially if it's our own title company. If it's an attorney on the buyer side, have the buyer's attorney. It doesn't really matter who. There isn't any advantage one way or another, buyer seller, on who holds the money, because once the money, we hold the money, I'm responsible for it. I can't let it go, regardless of the outcome, until either the contract is mutually released between both parties. Okay, so that is the golden rule, and nobody wants to play around with escrows, and it's a big thing. It's definitely a huge heavy fine, and it doesn't really matter who's holding the money. It's not going to be like, in fact, there's probably, I'm not going to lose my broker's license over somebody's $3 or $5 or more $1,000. I'm not going to, our attorney's not going to lose his law license over it. But people make mistakes, and these are one of the areas that you kind of like, oh, well, they thought they were out of the contract. No, you have to get a release, get a mutual release, get it signed by all parties. Once it's been acknowledged and received and acknowledged, then we release the monies. And we don't make, I could tell you there's no exceptions for that. I mean, we had one a few years back, commercial transaction. We were holding 20 grand. And it was actually an a lease purchase. So client was leasing the property, big numbers, was supposed to buy it, defaulted. And that seller called me every day and said, I want my money back. And I said, you can't have it. His attorney called me and said, you can't have it. And it actually cost us at the end of the day, $3 grand not to give his money back, because the advice we gave him from day one is he had to go to court, get a court order as far as what we needed to do with the direction of that money. We don't have any, it's a price of doing business, but we had no other recourse, because the damages for me to give the money back, it would have been triple damages. So that adds up a lot. So we have to really watch those items. Yep.
Raymond up there.
And where do I do that at? Right here? I got it. All right. Hey, Raymond, how are you? Thanks, Brenda. Okay. So, yeah, I'll look when I see that. I'll just say that I was afraid to click anything, Brent. So that's really important to make sure that we do have, a place for our monies, making sure you have copies, more so making sure you have the right paperwork to submit that. As I talked a couple months ago during the office meeting, not a bad idea to have our title company set a secure wire up if your people want to, work a wire. Make sure that you always have in your contract also the disclosure for wires. You need to cover ourselves. You need to cover yourself on making sure that we're putting out that wire disclosure, and that should actually be in paragraph 43. Okay. Any questions so far? No. Yes.
So I just want to verify that with the escrow, when you say you got to get the release and both seller and buyer had to sign it in order to get out of the contract. So if the buyers is not like they want to hold on and fight for the house because maybe the appraisal that is low,
Mhm.
And they say, no, I like, they want to file and they don't want to sign a release. So does it mean that you cannot get out of the contract?
Well, it means that they're not out of the contract if there's no release. It means they're still in contract. So you're on, see, it goes both ways. This is what's interesting about it. If it's a buyer, so I get this deal, Emily, your people are in a contract, they negotiated a price, they put a good faith deposit down, the property appraised less than the purchase price, correct?
Yes,
And the sellers don't want to concede to that lower price, correct?
yes.
And they also don't want to sign a mutual release?
No, the seller is like willing to, but the buyer saying like they think no, they want to like hold on to like not sign the release contract and like fight it and with their.
Well,
What if
they
the
can still
buyer is-
buy the house. They could buy the house, but they want the seller, they want their cake and eat it too, right? They want to buy the house, not at the contractual price, but they want to buy it at the appraised price, correct?
Yes.
So the seller said no. So what advantage does the buyer have to hold on to that if the seller is saying, I'm not reducing the price? Because this happens all the time. I mean, it's giving this is set up to help the buyer in this case. It's helping the buyer. Now the buyer can pay the difference of the appraised value and the purchase price. Are they not willing to do that?
Oh no, this is just like not the current contract I have, but I just just prepare for in the future, like if there's something come up like that happens,
Oh yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, there's three options that happen. It's either the seller concedes, either the buyer concedes, or they mutually agree to come up with an alternative price. The fourth option is to default the contract by signing a mutual release between all parties. So those options, if they don't happen, the mutual release comes into play. I mean, but to sit on the sideline and just not do anything, I don't understand the advantage to that, because A, they get their money back out of escrow, they put it back in their own pockets, and of course they start searching for another house. So that would, is it any different than any of those options?
Yeah, right. Because like basically that they are not qualified for the contract to sell price. So basically that they are breach of contract with the sale price. Is that correct? So if the buyer do not sign that, then.
Well, there's no breach. There's no breach of contract. It's just that the property, I mean, it's not uncommon for a property in this market. I mean, we're in a different market than we've ever had ever. I mean, there's no other word, no other explanation for it. So if a property is selling above the asking price, then nobody forced them to sign the contract. They agreed to, correct?
Yes.
So that is what they agreed to. So now the fact of the matter is, keep in mind, I mean, why does an appraiser go out to the house? What are they doing?
They want to make sure that they are protected for the value of the money that they are lending for. That's
correct. Okay, and now if there's a reason why they feel it's not, now there are houses that are built out of, I should say, the synergies of some communities. In other words, they might be on the outskirts of town. They might not be in an A area. They might be in a B or C area. So, I mean, they might be worth less because of the economic conditions around it. So if the appraiser feels that there's just not enough value there, obviously they're going to give the number. They do only want to protect the bank's interest at that point. So if the buyer, I don't understand the buyer's position. If the seller's not willing to concede to the lower price, why would they insist on holding on?
right. So the bottom line is, like, if they do not sign, they just cannot get their escrow money back. But the seller basically can go on and accepting another offer. Is that?
Oh, the seller is going to go on with them or without them. Now, the fact that they don't have a meeting of the minds, are there attorneys involved in this transaction, or this is a hypothetical?
This is hypothetical.
Okay. Well, typically at one point we start to see some lawyers get involved. And we typically like to see the buyers get their money back. It's just what we call an impasse. It's just not going to happen. Now, does it throw a monkey in the, does it throw a wrench in the mix? It does, because theoretically a seller can't enter two contracts, correct?
Yes.
So that's what everyone thinks, that they're not going to sell the house from under them. But the buyers clearly haven't demonstrated a reason to even negotiate and or accept or deny the contract. So at one point, what's going to hurt them contractually is they're not going to hit their dates. They're not going to get the biggest thing in the contract. And what do you think the first thing, I mean, since we're thinking about this, what do you think the first thing is going to happen with these buyers? It's not going to be in compliance with the contract, which would make them liable and responsible for not doing the contract. What do you think the first thing is going to be?
Well, I'm guessing that the first thing they lose in the extra money.
Oh, no. What's the first thing that's going to happen is they're not going to be able to deliver a commitment on time. So there's a commitment in day.
Yes.
Okay. So now all of a sudden they're going to, guess who's going to be in breach of contract?
The buyer.
That's correct. The same people that are instituting all this, nonsense. Yeah, you're not giving me a lower amount, and I get it. I mean, I think the hardest thing for us all. I look at some of the values of these houses that I know it's going to adjust at one point. There's just no way the ceiling is unlimited for this long a time. I've never seen it happen like this. And I remember good days in the late 80s when it was nuts, like, kind of like it is now. And I also remember when we were borrowing, lenders would let you borrow up to 110 or 120% of the value. So this market definitely will cool down at one point once the courts open up again. But I think that they're putting themselves in a position, in this case specifically, to be a breach of contract, which now they could be sued by the seller for non-performance. Does that make sense? And now you're giving them a reason to keep their money.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mike. I'm just making sure,
No, you're doing the right thing. And if you ever have questions like that, always feel free to call Jim or myself, and we'll make sure
so
that we.
like Kat said earlier, that you never know, expecting that like there is an agent is not signing like this, like seller disclosure, or a part of the first of the contract. So
there's a lot of moving. Listen, I get it. I mean, I remember that, we didn't have the technology in the 80s. 90s and even the early 2000s that we have now. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of big personalities moving into these transactions, and there's a lot of people that are expecting their expectations to be as high as they possibly can. So, and when they don't hit those expectations, they want to look for somebody to lean on, and that's typically us. So let's just make sure that we try and do everything we can to make sure we're in compliance. B, we're really working towards the best interests of either the buyer or seller. And realistically, even if it's a colleague on the other side and they're not just doing a nice job because they have their patterns of business, you got to work around them. Find a way to work around them. Find a way to, or her. I don't want to single out anybody, but try and find a workaround, because at the end of the day, we will have to work with these people at one stage. They might have a listing, they might have a buyer. So to put a wall up is only going to hurt you in the future. So you try and work around everybody's little idiosyncrasies, that they don't like to do this or that because that's the way their pattern of business.
Wise advice, Mike.
You got to work it. I mean, it's just like it's just the way it is. But thank you. The other thing is, I think Jim brought up a good point. I just reiterate it because it does get into contracts. We're a listing agent, and we're fortunate enough to have multiple offers. Okay. Do you think you have any liability with multiple offers?
Probably yes.
Yes is the answer. Yeah. And the reason for it is somebody could come back, and if they could prove that you did not say, let me set up a nice scenario. You put a nice listing up, all of a sudden, a day later, it's, you're not taking any other offers. And you had a couple calls from agents, and they say, hey, listen, we want to put an offer on this. Oh, no, we're already together. Seller doesn't want any more offers. And now all of a sudden, or you email them or you text them, and all of a sudden they say, they didn't let go, right? Because they remember, it's like, what, Katie had that listing and she didn't even let me show that house. And then I look at the remarks 30 days later, and Kenny was the listing and the selling agent. Now, do you think that I would be upset? Or do you think that I would have said, you know what, I had a buyer for that property. I wrote it, I wanted to get into it. She wouldn't let me in. And now, ironically enough, poof, there it is, listing and sale. Do you think that there's any culpability on the listing agent's end when they're not transparent, when they open and shut a door down for somebody coming through? Because the answer is yes, just a short answer. But the other bigger question is what's going to be your responsibility and what you could be liable for. And a lot of that is a lot. Right now, you didn't give your seller the ability to have the best on any and all offers, right? The real estate commission is very clear. And I know that we get stuck on timelines. And I want to get off that question just for a little bit, but we go through a contract. We do the 3-day attorney review. Are there any times that that attorney review doesn't have to go 3 days?
Yeah, if the attorney review the contract the first day and everybody agrees in the terms.
Which attorney?
Both attorneys.
That's correct. Both, because keep in mind, both parties must be represented to forego an attorney review. And the reason to forego an attorney review is any real estate contract, any addendum that's driven by a realtor is not an attorney. So there must be a 3-day attorney review in there. So that's wanted everyone to understand that.
Well, but if there is an attorney and the other side doesn't have an attorney, that attorney
Can't represent both sides.
doesn't represent both sides, but if the other side agrees to the term of those, no, we have to wait until the 3rd day. Oh, I did. Usually if the other side say yes, we consider that the end of the attorney.
Well, and what would happen if you had that $1 million deal and you thought you had that understanding, and in that second day, the attorney sends you a letter and say, hey, Katie, no, we got an offer at $1.2 million. We're closing that contract down. And we're going with that offer.
Well, no, if they put it in writing that if they send me an email back saying we consider this the attorney review period ending, is that not valid? No,
it's valued. It's just not going to be acknowledged.
Oh, okay.
Both sides.
I always learn something new with
both sides need to be, it's interesting because I had this happen to me last year on a 2750 house. It's $2,750,000. And we did the contract. I had the attorney delete the attorney review period. And I said to the agent, I said, could you get me? I would like the seller, because I remember doing this. I said, could you have the seller sign off that they don't have an attorney? The seller said, I think we're okay. We're going to stay with this deal. We really like your people. She would not. I said to her, so I called the agent. I said, isn't your kid an attorney? She goes, yeah. I said, is he licensed? She goes, yeah. I said, why can't he sign off? She goes, seller doesn't want him to. On the 3rd day of attorney review at 2:30 in the morning or 2:30 in the afternoon, I was getting lunch with my daughter and I got a call that they got a 2850 cash offer. I could tell you I never spent a dime of that commission. It happens. I'm telling you, this is real stuff. So don't set yourself up for the answer. And I tell you, and I would have paid $500 to have an attorney review it for the seller. The seller had these people in his pocket.
Yeah.
And I think he just leveraged us. He had us at 2750. He got 2750. And there you go.
It will not have helped me in the $2 million in Pennsylvania, because in Pennsylvania, there is no attorney review.
That's right. This is welcome to New Jersey. So we have to pay attention and stay within the rules and try and make sure that we get everybody working on the same page. Because when you leave little gaps, and that's why we go over this, you'll never forget that story now.
I know.
That's believe me, it hurt me. It hurt me.
I bet
So,
it did.
but that's the stuff that happens, and this is why it's valuable to listen, learn, and do what we can to make sure our contracts are as strong as possible. So before we end up, any questions, even outside of this, that somebody may have regarding anything they're working on? Doesn't necessarily have to be a contract question. Everybody's good? How are you guys lead generating? I know we had a bunch of you go through Bold. It's nice.
Yeah.
I looked at Robert's board today. It's all full with agents that have buyer leads, which is great. And I hope that you all get contracts. And please, again, before you get stuck and you feel like you're overwhelmed, just feel free to leverage ourselves, our agents. You know, some of the, you know, what's nice about the company is there's always people around the offices that are willing to help others. So leverage everybody, especially in the beginning, because it only makes you a better agent. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because that only makes you a better agent, and you'll be more productive and you won't get yourself sued or us. So
Really quick, I just want to clarify on like whole harmless regarding like COVID-19 before that we have found that.
you know what? Good question, Emily. I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I was actually reminded to, and I get off cue. We still, let me reiterate, should be using the COVID-19, and that should be held in there. That should still be in the contracts. Is everybody use? I'm starting to see a lot. I'm seeing more contracts that I review without COVID. And we just had one with one of our agents in Ocean City who did a deal, and they didn't have the COVID. They didn't have the COVID contract, or the extension or disclosure, I should say. And they could have bought 2 days. The seller got out of the contract because the buyer's company did not deliver the commitment 1 day. I should say delivered the commitment 1 day past the due date on the contract, and the seller got out of the contract. That was about a $650,000 thereabout deal. Yeah. So that addendum, the first thing I asked the agent, I said, you did it down the shore. I said, you did the contract, did you put COVID in there? And he goes, no. So let's put that COVID in there. But Emily, I cut you off, and I apologize, but just finish your question, because I want to make sure I answer that.
Okay, so how harmless regarding COVID-19, before that we have just one form for buyer and sellers. Now we have separate for like seller, buyer, or open houses. So is this now we're using separate for different like purpose?
Yeah, those forms kind of evolved. Keep in mind, we weren't in the very beginning, we weren't using anything. God only knew we were going to go through a pandemic, right? But I think what we need to do is we kind of made them more specific. So if you're doing an open house, you have the COVID-19 signed or there for compliance efforts. I mean, we're trying to make sure people know that there's still, you should either have a mask on, or, or you should have, something to protect everybody else around you. So they are, you could pick the right form for however would apply most for your client.
When I heard you say that, I'm like, I'm sure I'm not getting the whole story, because I thought maybe it was.
Steve, are you talking to us? I think, do we have somebody in the background? Somebody in the background. Emily, did that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah, but if you represented the seller, do you still need to ask the buyer to sign?
No.
Okay, I just
no. There's actually a general COVID form just for specifically contracts, which gives the ability to have either 10 or more days, and you can go all the way up to 30 for an extension. Some people will push back on the 30 days because they really want to get those timelines shortened on a quicker deal. But you should definitely have, at this point, the COVID-19 addendum in the contract, just to protect all parties in the event of anybody getting sick, especially now with this new strand going around.
No, I'm asking, like, if the whole harmless for COVID-19, if you represent the seller side, it's say the seller's whole harmless, do you still ask the buyer to sign the whole harmless when the agent showing the property?
No, I haven't seen that. I'm more interested right now for today's sake is making sure that this hold harmless is in the contract of sale when in paragraph 43. And that's signed off by all parties. But if somebody is showing, you're talking specifically on an open house, whether you should have it, the buyer sign, you could have that form there. You could ask them to sign it. There's nothing contractual that we can do to make them sign that. And more so, we can't tell them not to see the property without signing it. But I think I'm seeing less and less personally of agents asking for the COVID-19 to be signed prior. I'm getting more questions, especially with some of the properties I've been showing. The sellers want to know if you're in compliance with if you're vaccinated or not. If you're not, then I think that they're asking you to do certain things. If you are, I've asked. I said, do you want masks on? Do you not want masks on? I mean, I think we're just in that. We're trying to make everybody feel good, and I think try and do what's best, family. That's all I could tell you. I mean, there's no restrictions. I mean, state guidelines are still there. I mean, Murphy still has these guidelines set forth that we're still trying to comply with. So you have to pick the right form for the right party.
Okay,
All right.
Mike.
And that's it. Thank you so much for taking the time. Our new agent, we're going to wish the best too. And if there's any questions, please feel free. You know, you can call me and I'll answer the phone. All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Take care. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks again for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.